Have you ever told yourself, I'll start when I'm ready? Not tomorrow, not next month. When I have more money. When I learn one more skill. When I feel more confident. It sounds responsible. It sounds smart. But what if that voice is not wisdom? What if it is fear wearing a calm face? Most people spend years waiting for the perfect moment. They believe they are preparing carefully. They make plans. They calculate risks. They imagine every possible mistake. From the outside, it looks thoughtful. Inside, it is often hesitation. We tell ourselves we are being practical. We say we just need more time. We say we are almost ready. But the truth is simple. The perfect time rarely arrives. And while we wait, life keeps moving. The desire to be fully prepared feels safe. It gives us control. If we can predict every problem, maybe nothing will hurt us. Maybe nothing will go wrong. But trying to control the future has a hidden cost. It steals our energy in the present. We carry worries about things that have not happened. We solve problems that do not exist. And slowly, without noticing, we become stuck. Not because we are incapable, but because we are carrying too many imagined tomorrows. There was once a young man named Aon who lived in a small, quiet valley. The valley was peaceful. The air was clean. Nothing truly bad ever happened there. But the valley was surrounded by tall, gray mountains. And beyond those mountains, people spoke of a golden city, a place where life felt bigger, brighter, freer. Aon dreamed about that city often. He imagined new streets, new faces, new chances. He wanted to see what was on the other side more than anything. Yet Aon was careful, very careful. He believed that a smart man never rushes. A smart man prepares. A smart man thinks ahead. So he told himself he would leave the valley as soon as he was fully ready. Not almost ready. Fully ready. He would save more money first. He would learn more skills. He would plan for every danger the mountain might hide. And the dream was alive in his heart. But his feet never moved. Each day he looked at the mountains and felt two things at once: excitement and fear. The valley was small, but it was safe. The mountains were uncertain, but they were calling him. So he waited, and he called that waiting preparation. One morning, Aon decided it was time to prepare properly. If he was going to cross the mountains, he would do it the smart way. He bought a large, strong backpack and placed it on his wooden table. Then he opened a notebook and began writing a list of every danger he might face. He wanted to think of everything. Nothing would surprise him. First, he thought about the cold. The mountain peaks were covered in snow, so he packed a thick fur coat. It was heavy, but necessary. Next, he thought about hunger. The journey could take weeks. What if there was no food? He went to the market and bought dried meat and large bags of grain. He filled half the bag with supplies. Then came the rain. Wet clothes could make him sick. So he bought a heavy canvas tent and forced it into the pack. He imagined wild animals. He added an iron sword. He imagined falling. He added a rope. He imagined darkness. He added a lantern and bottles of oil. Each item made sense. Each item felt responsible. But with every solution, the bag grew heavier. When the backpack was finally full, it stood tall behind him. Aon looked at it with pride. He had thought of everything. Cold, hunger, rain, beasts, darkness. He felt responsible. He felt safe. Early the next morning, he decided it was time. The sun rose gently over the valley. This was the day. He ate a good breakfast. He walked to the table. He slid his arms through the straps. He took a deep breath. and he tried to stand. His legs shook. His face turned red. The veins in his neck tightened. He pushed with all his strength, but he could not straighten his back. The bag dragged him down. He tried again. This time he managed one small, unstable step before he had to grab the wall to keep from falling. His chest burned. His breath felt heavy. The weight of his safety was crushing him. Everything inside that bag made sense. And yet, together, they made movement impossible. He had prepared so carefully that he could no longer begin. Sometimes, the things we carry to protect ourselves are the very things that keep us stuck. If this part of the story feels familiar, pause for a moment. Ask yourself quietly, what are you carrying right now? Days passed. Every morning, Aeon woke up with the same decision. Today will be different. Today I will lift it. He stood in front of the backpack. He tightened the straps. He bent his knees. He pushed with all his strength. And every morning, the result was the same. The weight forced him back down. Some days he managed a small step. Some days he could not even rise from the floor. His shoulders ached. His back throbbed. His breathing turned heavy before he even reached the door. So he stayed inside. From his window, he could see the mountains clearly. They looked close enough to touch, close enough to try. But the distance between his house and the mountain path felt impossible. He told himself he was still preparing. He told himself this was temporary, just a little more strength, just a little more planning. But the days quietly turned into weeks. The bag never became lighter. The mountain never moved closer. He was ready in theory, but in reality, he had not taken a single true step beyond his door. The valley remained safe, and his dream remained far away. One quiet afternoon, as Aeon sat near his open door, an old man walked past his house. The old man's hair was gray. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were clear and bright. He carried almost nothing, just a small wooden stick and a tiny satchel resting lightly on one shoulder. He was whistling. Not the sound of someone worried, not the sound of someone preparing, the sound of someone already on his way. Aeon noticed he was heading toward the mountain path. He stood up quickly. "Wait," Aeon called out. "Where are you going?" The old man stopped and smiled gently. "To the Golden City," he replied. "I hear it's beautiful this time of year." Aeon looked at the tiny satchel. It looked nearly empty. "You cannot go like that," Aeon said firmly. "You're not ready. Where's your tent? Your food? Your weapon? The mountains are dangerous, and you will not survive." The old man listened without arguing. Then he glanced inside the house and saw the enormous backpack resting on the floor. He stepped closer and tapped it lightly with his stick. "And you," the old man said softly. "You seem to have everything." He looked back at Aeon. "So, why are you still here?" The old man did not argue. He did not criticize Aeon. He simply pointed at the sword. "Why do you carry this?" "For the wolves," Aeon answered. "What if they attack me?" The old man looked at him quietly. "Have you seen any wolves today?" Aeon hesitated. "No." "So today," the old man said softly, "you're carrying heavy iron for a wolf that does not exist." He moved to the tent. "And this?" "For the storm. What if it rains?" The old man glanced at the bright sky outside the door. "Is it raining right now?" "No." "Then you are carrying tomorrow's storm on your shoulders today." One question at a time, the pattern became clear. The food was for hunger that had not arrived. The rope was for a fall that had not happened. The lantern was for darkness that had not come. None of the dangers were real in that moment. But the weight was. Aeon slowly understood. He was not crushed by the mountain. He was crushed by imagined futures. Before we continue, pause for a second. Ask yourself quietly, is the problem you fear happening right now? If not, maybe it is time to put one heavy thing down. Aeon stood there in silence. The sword was no longer in his hand. The tent was no longer in the bag. He felt exposed, almost foolish. If I remove these things, he said quietly, then I am not prepared. The old man shook his head gently. You are confusing preparation with prediction. Aeon frowned. Preparation, the old man continued, is trusting that you can respond when something happens. Prediction is trying to solve it before it exists. He looked toward the mountains. You cannot carry every possible future. No one is strong enough for that. Aeon looked at the remaining items in his bag. He realized he had been trying to defeat tomorrow before even leaving today. He thought he was being wise. In truth, he was trying to control what could not be controlled. The only moment you can handle, the old man said, is this one. If it rains, you will find shelter. If you are cold, you will make fire. If danger appears, you will think and act. But you cannot fight a thought, and you cannot solve a problem that has not arrived. For the first time, Aeon understood the difference. Aeon slowly knelt beside the backpack and looked inside again. The sword was gone. The tent was gone. The heavy sacks of grain were gone. Now there was only a bottle of water, a small loaf of bread, and a thin blanket folded neatly at the bottom. The bag that once felt like a mountain now looked almost too small. He reached down and lifted it carefully. It rose easily. No shaking legs, no burning shoulders, no desperate gasp for air. For a moment, he simply stood there, surprised by his own strength. But the lightness felt strange, almost uncomfortable. Without the heavy gear, he felt unprotected, as if he'd stepped outside without armor. What if something happens? He asked quietly, fear still clinging to his voice. The old man did not rush to answer. He watched Aeon stand tall for the first time. You are not weaker, he said calmly. You are finally free to move. Aeon realized something important. The weight had not made him safer. It had only made him tired. The fear was still in his mind, but it was no longer on his back. Aeon stood at the edge of his door, the light backpack resting gently on his shoulders. The mountains were still there. The path was still uncertain. The risks had not disappeared. But something inside him had changed. He was no longer trying to solve the entire journey before taking the first step. He was no longer carrying storms that had not formed or wolves that had not appeared. He looked at the old man. What if I make a mistake? He asked one last time. The old man smiled. Then you will stop. You will think, and you will solve it when it becomes real. That was the truth Aeon had been avoiding. He did not need to predict the future. He needed to trust himself in the present. So he stepped forward. One step, then another. He did not collapse. He did not fail. He simply began. And that was enough. Maybe the mountain in your life is still standing in front of you. Maybe your backpack feels heavy right now. If this story spoke to you, take one small action today. Drop one imagined fear. And if you want more stories like this to help you walk lighter, subscribe and walk with us.